Hi guys, so before we get into it, a couple of quick disclaimers. Firstly, there will be spoilers today. Honestly, I don't think it will affect your enjoyment of this movie. Secondly, you'll find all my other reviews of Stephen King adaptations in my Stephen King playlist. I'm not going to start a separate one just for Children of the Corn. All these can just go into Stephen King. That's absolutely fine. So I watched this the other night with a great degree of trepidation in the pit of my belly, because I was wondering if this would be the film already where the quality of this series just completely fell off a cliff, because that's what happened with the Howling review series that I did. First film, brilliant. Second film, and things didn't really improve after that. Howling 6 was all right, but most of those films were a real chore to cover. But a couple of things of note here. Firstly, Children of the Corn 2 is actually pretty good. I didn't just survive this movie. I actually really enjoyed it. And secondly, I noticed that this film came out in 1992, so a full 8 years after the first one. That surprised me, because given that there's 11 films in this series, I would have thought that they would have jumped into making a whole bunch of sequels quite quickly, but apparently not. Seemingly it took them a while for the penny to drop that Children of the Corn was something that could be relentlessly exploited. There's no Linda Hamilton this time. For whatever reason, she did not want to return. Why? I don't know. She did Terminator 2 in 1991, so it's not like she was against the idea of doing sequels. So why not do Children of the Corn 2 in 1992? I'll never understand women sometimes, but in all seriousness, I did not notice Linda Hamilton's absence in this movie, really. She was an alright character for the first film, but she's not essential for these films to work. Honestly, it's not a problem that Linda's not back. So to give you an idea of the plot, this one tries to move the events of the first film forwards in a fairly logical and welcome way, because the really lazy way to have done a sequel would have just been to have more adults turn up to Gatlin to get slaughtered, and you could have had more kills, but that's not what they do. So when we pick things up, the wider world has discovered what happened in the first movie. There's police tapes all over the place, there's ambulances and reporters and police. It's like the start of Friday the 13th Part 4. It's like after the Lord Mayor's show. But these kids who are still alive, they get fostered to the next town over, and I can't remember the name of it, but this is actually the only unrealistic thing about this setup, because if this was a real story and there was a whole bunch of kids needing to be fostered, they would surely just be sent to all four corners of the United States, wherever there were families next in line to adopt, right? I don't know how it works in America, but the idea that all the kids would just go to the next town, which is probably not that big, that didn't really sit with me, but it doesn't really matter. But the important thing is that all these kids are still carrying an element of the demigod inside them. They are still potentially murderous, and it doesn't take them long in the second film to start killing the adults, except they go about it in a more subtle way this time, because in the first film they just murdered all the adults in one bloody Sunday morning seemingly. This time around they're sort of taking their time a little bit, killing one adult here, killing somebody else over there, and it's up to a local reporter to try and step in and save the day. I think he's actually from like New York or somewhere, to be honest, but he's got his son with him, and they sort of team up and try and put a stop to what's going on, and that's essentially the story. If you'd have pitched this to me before I'd have watched Children of the Corn 2, I probably would have approved of it. As good as the first film was, it didn't really have much in the way of kills. It just wasn't part of that film's remit, but this time around, there was definitely a mandate to give you, the viewer, some interesting, varied deaths, and the film definitely delivers. Ever wanted to see someone crushed by their own house? Got you covered with Children of the Corn 2, and there are people who burn alive, and I'm not going to spoil all the deaths for you, but there's some good ones in this. The one exception is the woman in the wheelchair who gets hit by the Mack truck, and she goes flying through the window of a bingo hall. I think it's meant to be humorous, but it doesn't really land, and what doesn't help is the angle that she goes through the window is all wrong. It's just badly shot, this kill. But apart from that, all the other murders are great. I had a good time with this, just watching somebody die every 15 minutes. Another improvement over the first movie is in the characters and their interpersonal relationships. The good characters in this film are better than what we had first time around, and I enjoyed how the romances develop in the second film. In the original, it was an established couple, and so there wasn't really an arc that you could do with them. But this time, so I've got this young lad called Danny. He's the son of the reporter. And very early on, Danny meets Lacey, a local girl, and they start having a romance. They start flirting. And as the film goes on, they get closer. And it's really cute, actually. The script does really well for these characters. I enjoyed watching their romance. The girl who plays Lacey, her name is Christy Clark, and she's excellent in this. I actually looked her up after the movie just to see what she went on to do. But sadly, she pretty much packed in acting not long after this film, which is a real shame because I think she adds a lot of spark to this. But the funny thing is, there comes a point in this film where Danny and Lacey are kind of ready to head to the bedroom. They've reached the stage of that relationship. But the filmmakers were clearly nervous about having characters this young going to bed. So what they've done is they've kind of flipped over to the John character, who is the father figure, and they've had him sleep with Angela, the owner of the B&B. So they've had a sex scene for those two, but it's really out of the blue. Like, throughout the movie up to that point, John and Angela haven't really been heading towards sex, and then boom, they're in bed with each other within the space of like 2 minutes. But we have been following Danny and Lacey all the way through the movie, getting closer and closer, and yet they don't end up sleeping with each other. It's just an observation. I do like the surname of the Angela character in this. Her surname is Casual. So basically, John the reporter turns up in this town and has a little fling with Angela Casual. Love it. The shooting location this time has moved from Iowa to North Carolina. Seemingly, there are more than enough cornfields in North Carolina to do a Children of the Corn film, but it's not a downgrade. In terms of locations, I think number 2 is even better than what we got with number 1. And the visuals in number 1 was one of that film's strengths, but there were several times throughout this sequel where I was just looking on in awe at some of the places they found to film in. To my eye, the North Carolina cornfield areas look a lot greener than what we got with Iowa, but not a problem at all. I was genuinely stunned at times by how good this film looks. It was helped, no doubt, by the fact I was watching this on a remastered Arrow Blu-ray, but I wouldn't have expected aesthetics this strong in a sequel that takes place in a franchise as maligned as Children of the Corn. The special effects are not so hot, that they're more in line with the bad effects that we got first time around. There's this one bizarre thing that happens where a child is taken over by the demigod in the middle of the film, but to show this, the child is reduced to the size of an ant and he starts falling through a cornstalk. We just see him like, ah! And I think this is meant to symbolise that he's falling, his soul is falling into the grasp of the demigod. But I was just shaking my head at this, thinking, what are you doing? There's another thing they do where they show the demigod looking out from the corn. So we see through his eyes, but we never actually see him. Now, I approve of the fact we don't get to see what he looks like. But when we're looking through his eyes, I presume it's him anyway, he seems to have the same sort of vision as the Predator. And call me cynical, but this film came out in 92. The first 2 Predator films had come out not long before, in 87 and 90. So I think there was a little bit of plagiarism there. I almost expected the demigod to pop out in front of someone and go, "Want some corn?" Staying on the subject of all things villainous, I don't think the child murderers are as good this time. I really missed Isaac and Malachi. They just haven't found any interesting actors to replace them. The main kid on this occasion is very whiny and shouty, and he just kind of got on my nerves, to be honest. But at least the finale is an improvement over what you get first time around. There's a good, exciting conclusion to this that takes place in the clearing of a cornfield. There's a combine harvester out of control. It's one of those machines with the spinny blades at the front that could chop you up if you get caught up in it, and characters get close to dying in it, and at least one villain does get killed in it. There's lots of potential in this franchise for agricultural accidents, shall we say. There's lots of interesting machinery that you can find in and around farms. They should use that machine that kills Jamie in Halloween 6. They should bring that into Children of the Corn at some point, I think. But definitely a good film. I would say it at least matches the first one. The first one was a spikier film, a more raw sort of experience. It was chasing that Texas Chainsaw type vibe, like almost a real story kind of feel. It didn't quite achieve that entirely, but that was what it was close to achieving. The second one is more of a pure fantasy 80s slasher. No chance of mistaking this for a real life story. Obviously this was filmed in the early 90s, but it's reacting to what's just happened in the 80s. It's using that as its inspiration. It's a funny film at times as well. Like there's an interesting side character, a priest, and he comes out with all these zingers like, fornication is pestilence. Like he hates any type of sin, this guy, and it's just really funny every time he opens his mouth. It's a big shame that he doesn't accidentally walk in on the sex scene. That would have been worth the price of admission alone, but it doesn't happen. There's also a doctor character who is giving out lollipops to the kids at the start of the film. Every time he gives them a checkup, they're not asked about these lollipops, but they take them off his hands anyway. But then later in the film, when they kill him, they put one of their lollipops in his mouth as if to say, yeah, stick this where the sun don't shine. So yeah, good sequel and genuinely funny at times too. So we've reached that point where we go to the Bag of Terror, so I can give you my score for Children of the Corn 2. Here's the Bag of Terror. Let's see what we've got inside. We've got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. That is the exact same score that I gave the original, but I absolutely would have settled for that coming into this. I think the first one is maybe technically a slightly better movie, but the second one is definitely more fun. It essentially gives you good characters, good kills, and then it's like it's saying, come and criticise me if you can. And it's not actually that easy to, because I genuinely really enjoyed this movie. This did not feel like work covering this film. Will that trend continue with part 3? We will see. But that's for another day. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.